Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Lunch and Learn. I'll be your host. Hello. I'll be your host, Jared Rodriguez. I'm on the training team, and if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat, or you can, I can allow you to talk, and you can communicate that to me, and you can ask your question that way. So if you have any comments or questions, let me know, and I'll answer it. All right, Murray, how's it going?
All right, I have a quick question. We just upgraded to version 8.9. And now when you run the debugger, by default, it runs in sampling mode, which is apparently triggering. In the specific case we were running into today, it was triggering an error telling us that we couldn't have a form in run flows for list, which we didn't. But only when we turned off the sampling mode did it run correctly. And I'm not sure if that's a setting we can set so that it never runs in sampling mode, or how that, if that's changed and why.
No, that's very interesting. I actually have not. I've seen a similar issue where that has like, because I was also having a run flow for list as well, and I've had that issue replicate, but I didn't know it was tied to sampling mode. Let's see.
I didn't either, but somebody got frustrated and was clicking on a whole bunch of stuff until they made it go away. And apparently it's tied to sampling mode.
Interesting. Let's see. I'm gonna try to go to my studio. I want to see if I can replicate that environment. I have a project that we can run and test. If I start, I should error out like this. And then if I go here, it says
yes,
like this.
That's exactly what we got.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
Let's see if I do this and debug, and then let's say I say options and say debug only, or to uncheck this.
Yeah, just uncheck that, and then right, and it worked.
So I went through, well, it's still running. But yeah, it's processing. I can see it processing. Yeah, okay, that's a trick. No, that would be, what version you said was it in? Because I think that's a DT, and I'll definitely get that submitted.
8.9. We went from 6.19 to 8.9, so I don't know when it started, but it didn't used to do that in 6.19, that's for sure.
Exactly, yeah. No, that's perfect. Yeah, that's a DT. I'll make sure that we get that submitted, and our QA department knows about that. In regard to your question on the workaround, okay. Let me see.
I mean, we can obviously turn it off every single time, but we never had to before. So is there a setting where we can turn that off?
That's what I want to check. Let's go in the settings and let's take a look real quick. If there's like some type of debug, global debugger settings. But this is a global debugger, so I don't think it'd be here. Auto stop debugger. Okay, that's just groups who can have access to it. Let me look at designer or designer studio settings. I'm wondering, let's kind of see. Let's search debug and let's see if we find something. Nothing in the debug or sampling. Maybe try that. Nope, nothing there. So I don't think that can be changed, fortunately. But I'll definitely get that DZ submitted because that is annoying. So.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. No, thanks for sharing that. I will make sure. You should type that in right now. Alrighty. All right. Any other questions you have?
No, that was it.
All right. Thank you so much. My pleasure. Well, I think we also have a pre-submitted question. Let me go back and pull that up too. A pre-submitted question for I don't think it's so great. Hold on. There we go. All right, perfect. Got it. So this question was, I'm having difficulty understand the process slash folder behavior on case entity data types. In the flow designer, when I try to select from flow, I find case ID, entity ID, and extension ID, and the case entity name ID, the ID of the row in this data structure. Ivan, could you expound upon that more? I'm not sure what the question is. I'll give you permission to talk so you can come off mute.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. So when I create a case entity data structure, and then I want to use this case entity in a project. So there are two scenarios where I'm gonna use it. The first scenario is in just a regular flow, and the other scenario is in a trigger flow within the configuration folder of that case entity. Okay. So I'm just confused when let's talk about the first scenario. I am in a flow and I want to use that case entity somehow. So the first thing to do, I want to make sure that I'm doing it right. I define an input in that flow, and this input is of the case entity that I built earlier type, right? Okay. Then when I try to use it in this flow, so let's say I go and try to select from
So you're in a trigger flow now. So you're saying when you try to
this scenario is the regular flow.
Okay.
Not the trigger flow. Okay.
Okay.
So I defined an input of that case entity type in the flow, and then when I try to refer, like use it inside the flow, and I go select from flow. So I have this, let's say it's called billing case. It's a billing case data structure. Okay. So
Okay.
I open the billing case data structure, and then I find case ID, I find entity ID, I find extension ID, and then I find billing case ID, and billing case ID is the row in that data structure that I defined earlier. So I put an ID in that data structure, right? And I'm not sure which one of these IDs to use to make any calculations or make any work related to that case entity. So which one of these IDs that I should use here?
For determining, and the objective is to determine, to do a calculation, or?
So let's think of an objective to check a field in that data structure. So let's say there is a flag. It's a Boolean type field, and this flag says billing required or not required. It's either a true or false. So I want to check if that's true or false. So like in the okay, after I check if it's true or false, I want to set entity state. I want to change the state based on that rule.
Okay.
That entity state, it takes a entity ID, right? So what should I enter in the entity ID? As I said, there are a couple of IDs there, and I'm not sure which one of them I should use.
Oh, I see. So you're trying to change the state. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So it's important to note there are three. So what a case entity is, and what a flow execution extension is. All it is it's just the decisions folder, entity folder data structure tied to whatever data type that the user defined. And what that means is, so if I go into, I'm gonna try to illustrate it this way. So if I go into the flows folder, right? And I'm just going to open up my query editor real quick, right? There is a data structure, not data structure. There is a data table in decisions called entity underscore folder. And when you look at the entity underscore folder, right, you see the folder for all of the different processes, right? So this shows you everything. And that's where you have the state field, right? The state field is always tied to the folder data structure. But then you may be asking, Jared, how is this relevant? I'm asking about the case entity data structure. I'm going to get there. On every single entity underscore folder record, so every folder, there is a field, as you can see on my screen here, called an extension ID, right? What is that extension ID, right? So I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to give you more detail so you kind of holistically understand what it is. So because the folder extension data structure, the case entity data structure, and the flow execution data structure are all just decisions folders that are combined with whatever data members a user specified. So for example, right? So put a, like, remember extension ID, because I'm going to answer it, but I'm answering it in this way because it's such a great question you've asked. And so I want to answer it this specifically. So it's going to help your understanding of it. So just remember extension underscore ID. All right. So now let's say I'm going to create a, I'm actually going to go to my local since it's just a little faster. And I'm going to build or I'm just going to build a case entity data structure. And so when I go to my project, so project 5, whatever, I'm going to create a data type, and I'm going to call this, excuse me, it's going to go user defined types, and we're going to go case entity. And so we're going to, I'm call this my case. Say my case, right? And I'm just going to have prop 1, prop 2. Right, and sure, we'll leave that as string. So now when I save this is a case entity. So now what's happening is Decisions is saying, all right, I'm going to take that entity underscore folder, the folder data type in decisions. And what I'm going to do is, since Jared created a my case entity data structure, I'm going to combine and say any record that Jared creates of the my case data structure, Decisions creates the folder data type, but then adds and fills in that extension ID with my user defined type to it. That's where the extension ID comes into place. That's the combining of those two things. So because I created a my case, which has property 1 and 2, and if I want to fetch that, Decisions actually fetches the folder data structure along with, and then does a join on the extension ID to add my own property to it. So that's why if I went into a subfolder, right? And if I combine so let me just create a simple, really tiny, not a simple flow, but like an example flow. And I'm going to drag a fetch entity step, and we're going to drag a results, right? And so I'm going to drag the my case, right? Because I have it, I define it. So now when I drag a my case, right, what it's going to do is it's going to pull the folder data structure that's combined with the my case by looking at all the ones that have that extension ID corresponding to this data structure. Now, I could also, if I didn't want to define my case, this is kind of like a roundabout way to do it. You don't have to, but just illustrates the point. Is I can grab the folder data structure, and then I can grab the extension type name, and then I can grab my case, right? And so what this does, as you can see on the end, is it gives you a list of the extensions and the folders that are tied to that extension. So that's how it illustrates what the extension ID does. It's basically just saying, hey, a user can define their own properties, and we need to combine those additional properties onto the Decisions folder data structure. And it does that by the extension ID. So that's how it all wraps around for the extension ID. Does that part make sense?
Yeah, the extension ID, if I understand correctly, then I'm not gonna need to use the extension ID in particular a lot because I have the NC ID, other IDs.
Correct. So we're gonna get to, so before you go there, right, this just answers your question of what is the extension ID. I'm gonna transition and answer the question about the case ID and all that stuff. But
Yes.
Does this part about the extension ID make sense before I proceed?
It makes like 80% sense to me. I understood like 80% of what you illustrated. We have the folder which is created when we create the case entity type, right? And then we define properties in that case entity type. So Decisions assigns an extension ID to our properties that we created.
The other way around. It extends the extension ID to the folder data, the Decisions internal folder data structure.
Okay, because we have a parent folder and then multiple folders within that parent folder, and each child folder corresponds to an instance of the case entity type.
Kind of. So it's not a storage mechanism, right? Because if you create a case entity, right, what are you creating? Like if you use the create step and you create something, what are you creating?
A folder.
You're creating a folder.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So remember, like with the Sprint 4 i9 application, when you create a folder record, the record's a folder.
Yes.
It just has your user-defined types attached to it. So the extension ID is saying it's a combination of the Decisions folder internal data type with the user's defined data type.
Okay, it's a
So it just
combination of
connects, it's
these
basically like,
two.
hey, so think of it as just like a database join. I have fields on the left table I want to have on the fields of the right table, and I combine them together, and that makes
Okay.
one thing. And
Yeah.
that's what your create steps are doing.
Yes, I understand.
Awesome. All right, so now we're gonna get to the next question, right? The next question is, okay, so I have a lot of different IDs. What are these IDs used for, and what are the differences of it? We already talked about the extension ID, right? It just combines your user-defined types to the folder. But now we're going to talk about, let's see, I'm going to go back to this other one right here. So now what we're going to talk about is, nope, not that one. I'm going to use this one as an illustration. Data types, I want loan application, and sure, we're going to go to this trigger flow. All right, cool. Now we're in here. All right. So now if I go to my data explorer to view this particular data type, you're going to see I have lots of information, right? I have the entity ID, I have extension ID. If I go even further, I'll have a folder ID, and right, I even have a folder ID up here. So, right.
Yes.
It's important to note, I'm actually do this on a notepad. I don't want Notepad++, not yet. I just want normal Notepad. I do like Notepad++, but right now I just need Notepad. All right, cool. Drag this over. So in the decisions world, the thing you're going to want to understand, right? So since a case entity is just a folder, and the entity ID is the actual identifier of the thing that lives, the record that exists, it's the primary key, because a case entity and a folder extension are folders, that means the folder ID is equivalent, so the two equals, to the entity ID. Those are the exact same thing. So that's why when we go to students with the training program, we say, hey, whenever you're dealing with sprint 4 or sprint 5 and you need to transition states, just use the folder ID. Now you can, if you want to drill down to extension data, go ahead and grab the entity ID and you can grab that. And it's the same thing, but you had to drill down to find it. Vice, you can just grab folder ID and use that, because the reason why those things are equivalent is because the folder ID and the entity ID are the same, because the records you create for case entities, folder extensions, and flow execution extensions, they're just folders. So by design, the entity ID and the folder ID is the same.
Okay, so in the case where we're dealing with case entity types, folder ID equals entity ID, and I can use either, and it's easier to use folder ID because it's just there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that answers the questions about that ID. So they're equivalently the same. Now, the reason why that matters is because what about a database structure? Right? Decision database, right?
Yeah.
Which one will it have, a folder ID or entity ID?
It's not a folder. If it's a database structure, right, like a table, it shouldn't be treated as folder.
Okay. So that's correct assumption. So what type of ID would it have?
Entity ID or the ID in the database structure.
Yeah, entity ID. In the decisions world, if you create a database structure, it's going to be entity ID. That's how it's named. So so the way you thought through that was 100% accurate. It's not a folder. So whenever I want to get the ID and I know I'm dealing with the database structure and decisions, I need to look for the ID field or the entity ID field. That's going to be the primary identifier for that.
Okay, and what about the ID that I define as a column in the case entity data structure when I create it? So I created the case entity data structure. It's called billing case, and it has an ID column and some other columns. What about that ID column? When do I need to use it, or do I ever need to use it?
So that's why with the decision data structures, we encourage users not to create their own custom ID fields unless they specifically want like some manual parent and child relationships, right?
Okay.
Reason why, because that decisions doesn't track that ID field. So if I have like billing case, right, and I say bill ID, that means nothing to decisions. That the user has to manually map into it. Right.
Yes.
So if in your context, right, you have a parent-child relationship where like the billing case is tied to an invoice, right, and you have a relationship between those two things, then you can have like an invoice ID or billing case ID in the invoice table, but then you'd have to manage that relationship manually and say, hey, grab that. So that's how that relates. It's not related to anything internal in decisions. It's something that the architect would have to understand what that is and document to the team and whatever and say, hey, we have a parent and child relationship between these two tables, and this is the ID that supports that relationship.
Yes, I understand. That answers it perfectly. So my last question is,
Mhm.
when I'm using a trigger flow and then I use the extension data, right? And in the extension data, I have case ID, and I did not define this as a column for the data structure. So what is the case ID here?
Yep, no, great. That's actually where I was going to go to next. So whenever you create a case entity, there's always this kind of like run flow ID. It's what's kind of called. It's not really named very well, but all that means is it's just a user identifier. So if I go into data types, if I edit my case entity right here, so I have a loan application case entity ID, or case entity, not ID, case entity.
Yeah.
And if I click over here, I have this prefix ID and prefix length. That's just like, hey, your financial loan is, AK 005013, right? It's just an easier reference for a user.
Oh yeah,
It's
that was the prefix that we used to have in the sprint training, like I think in sprint 4, where the I9 did applicant. So we have I9, some prefix, and then the number, right? I remember this. Okay,
Exactly. All it is just on case entities and flow execution extensions, you get that behavior by default. You don't have to like add a step to do it. It comes with the data structure. So I can change this prefix to be, LA for loan application, and I could give it a prefix length. And then every things I create will have that prefix. And by definition, since this is a unique identifier, if I configure it that way, you can also filter by this unique identifier. It's another, primary key, so to speak.
Yes, right. Awesome. Yeah, things are much clearer now. Thank you so much. When is this session going to be available on your YouTube channel?
I'm talking about this talking about this lunch and learn.
Yes.
I think as soon as the call ends, once that mixes, our team will upload it into the actual decisions YouTube channel. So not my personal one. It's gonna be the actual decision YouTube channel.
Yeah, I understand. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right. Any other questions? I see we got Jeremy joined on. Jeremy, do you have any questions? Also, let me pull up the chat. People probably were maybe typing questions. I think we got one from, so how can we replace the tab symbol in text? That's a good question. I don't think I really know the answer to that. I'll just play around with it and try to mess around with it because I don't know what symbol. I guess maybe you could use the extract text, or you can use I know there you can use the split string step to split it by or am I thinking of join strings? Let me see. I know there's a step that maybe, let me go, good example. But I think you could split by tab, or basically you can remove all the tabs that way, split string. Separator. I wonder if I can do constant, just type tab. Nope, tab just moves me to the bottom part. Character. I wonder if we can research like what the actual tab character is. To remove tab characters. Down checks, red. I think there's probably some forums online you can find, and I think there may be a way you can utilize some of these steps. They split. Split by character. I know you could also definitely. I wonder if regex. Move tab characters by regex. Or I'm just find the regex for tab. Yeah, so looking at /T is the regex character for tab. So you'll probably configure some way to utilize that for splitting strings. Because I think there are regex steps in decisions. And you could do regex replace. That's probably how I would handle that. Do like a regex replace and then \t, which is the character for tab. I mean, I know people don't like that. Because I know that would be very pretty replacement. Let's see, sure, I can give it a shot. We'll see pattern. We'll do \t, string replacement. So I wonder what these options are. Let's do a constant. Add. Ignore case, single line, ignore white space, right, left. Okay, so that's just kind of like, sure, ignore case. Why not? Input, so replacement. I'm gonna say we'll do like a O. And so let's say I have this string, notepad. Oh, I think we have notepad up. Let's say I do T tab T. And so I'm gonna copy this, or no, let's do T tab K. So it should say hook if it replaces it, or TOK. Put this here. The input right there. And then let's see if it works. But, hey, there we go. That's it. Can you replace with 4 spaces? I mean, you like you can. You just have to look up the regex for it and then utilize this step for it. So I would probably like, take this, look up the regex of the thing you want to replace and do that part. Because here you can say, here's the pattern, here's what you want to replace with, and it'll identify what it is and replace those things with it. So basically the limitations is just regex. All right. Jeremy, do you have any questions? No? Okay. All right. Well, I'll be on the call for about 5 more minutes. If there are more questions, I'll answer it and we'll stay on longer. Or if there's no questions, then we'll just end after 5 minutes. And I'll be here. All right. If HTML to PDF step has an image with a URL source, would the PDF step fetch that URL? It will. I actually tested that out on one of the projects we had in this in the what do you call it? No, where is it? Nope, I lost it. Where's the studio? This one. We tested it out on this one. We did not use it, but it was a cool feature where if you added that URL, then it would fetch that and you would have your PDF with that image on it. Let's see if I can find that flow. I don't think we used it. Loan officer scoring evaluation. I think it's in this one. Or do I already have it open? Loan officer, loan calculations. It's in this one. No, but I think we removed it. But yeah, it was a really cool step to use that. Was it add image to PDF step or just HTML to PDF or HTML has image tag? So it was image tag. Yeah. So I mean, you could do it if you want. You can do both ways. You can add an image to a PDF that way. But the way we did it was like, no, we had like image and then image URL. Because what we did is we actually copied the template HTML kind of invoice document that we're using for a project. We copied that, put it in the HTML PDF step, and then it generated that image and placed it there. Alrighty, it is 12:35. Thank you so much for attending. That concludes our lunch and learn for Wednesday. Tomorrow will be Sojanya. She works with our pre-sales engineering team, and she'll be a good wealth of resource for designing projects. So that's going to be a nice special treat to attend that one. So that'll definitely be a good one to ask for her. So, all right. Which are docs inside. For some reason, HTML to PDF does not see my image, which are docs inside decisions. Not sure. That might be a reverse lookup. I mean, might need to URL encode that, or also there could be some like DNS. Because basically you have the server calling back to the same server. It needs to know how to route back to it. The way we tested it, we were calling other systems that allow us to have access to those images. So you might want to also troubleshoot on that area there. But a lot of that stuff, that'd be outside of decisions of my expertise, unfortunately. But all right, everyone. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.